Hi, my name is Mike, and I wanted to discuss with you today some of the strengths of relative selection methods that we've learned in the course Recruiting and Selecting the Right Person. And so the first one I wanted to start with was interviews. And it's really important to understand the difference between structured and unstructured interviews. When an interview is structured, meaning that you're asking the same questions to all of the candidates, these formal interviews can reduce bias and ineffectiveness in selection compared to an unstructured interview where you're really just having a conversation that kind of goes anywhere and aren't really providing a lot of details that can then be used to compare. A structured interview is also going to include a lot of behavioral and situational questions, which can provide more insight into experience than you can learn from a CV. The questions in a structured interview, they can also be designed around more than just concrete job experience. You can look and ask questions to see if there's an alignment between the candidate and the organizational's values. Finally, there's a fairly high face validity with interviews because candidates expect them. They're part of the interview process in most organizations. One final strength of interviewing, I would add, is less about selecting the right candidate and more about the candidate selecting the right organization. And so the job interview actually provides an opportunity for the candidate to meet with and assess potential managers and colleagues as well. The second one I'd like to speak about is tests and how tests can be used as a strong way to make a selection method. So at your most basic part, you've got work sample tests where you're providing somebody with a hands-on assessment opportunity to perform a typical task they will face on the job. This is something like making coffee or maybe if you're looking for somebody to put together a certain component, you would have them actually physically put together the component as a way to measure their ability. They're quite strong in showing how somebody will do in that particular situation, but face some other limitations around whether or not you can actually recreate the actual experience, and really is the result of the test everything that you want to consider. And the example we learned in the course was, someone might make a great coffee, but if they don't have the other skills that a barista requires, it's very, very difficult that are very, very difficult to test under those situations. You also have cognitive ability tests, and these have been correlated quite sharply with job performance. And the nice thing about these is that they can show adaptive skills that can be applied across jobs. So something like general intelligence would be able to be applied to many different roles and particularly effective when you don't know exactly how the role is going to look in the future. And finally, you have personality tests, and these may be less correlated with job success than some of the cognitive ability tests, but they can still provide some insight into matches between a job and someone's personality preferences. And so for this, maybe we would think about somebody like a host or another public-facing position, where somebody who's probably pretty high in extroversion may be more comfortable doing that job than someone who's not. And finally, we have assessment centers, and the relative strengths of assessment centers is that they can be very comprehensive. You essentially have somebody where you might put them in an assessment center for a day or a number of days, and you can do a lot of different things with them to try and assess their capabilities. One of the advantages that assessment centers have over, the ones we've talked about so far, where you're talking about tests and you're talking about interviews, is you can really observe people with different skills, such as putting them in a group and seeing how they interact, or putting them in a situation where there's a group of people that will be asking them questions and see if that's part of their role. They're really able to answer kind of questions on the fly. And then finally, you can do quite a number of tests. So you might do an interview, you might do cognitive ability tests, you might do a panel discussion. You can do all of these things, and what you end up with is a much higher number of data points to consider than just a single interview or a test might yield. And so with that, assessment centers can be a very comprehensive way to assess somebody's fit for a role.